The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Prince William sat in his private study reviewing the day's schedule. His assistant knocked softly on the oak door before entering with a worried expression. "Your Royal Highness, there's been another incident," she said quietly, placing a newspaper on his desk. The headline screamed in bold letters about his brother Harry's latest public statement, criticizing the royal family's handling of mental health issues within the institution. William's jaw tightened as he read the article. This was the 5th time in 3 months that Harry had made public comments that painted the family in a negative light. The prince set the paper down carefully, his hands trembling slightly with suppressed anger. Later that morning, William walked through the corridors of Buckingham Palace for the weekly family meeting. The sound of his footsteps echoed against the marble floors as he made his way to the Queen's private sitting room. His grandmother sat in her favorite armchair, her expression grave as she gestured for him to take a seat. "William, dear, we need to discuss your brother's recent behavior," Queen Elizabeth said, her voice carrying the weight of decades of royal protocol and family management. "These public statements are becoming increasingly problematic for the monarchy's reputation." William nodded, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. "I understand, grandmother. I've been trying to reach out to Harry, but he seems determined to continue this path of public criticism." The Queen's eyes, still sharp despite her age, studied her grandson's face. "The family's unity has always been our strength. When that unity appears fractured in public, it weakens the very foundation of what we represent to the British people." As they spoke, other family members began arriving for the scheduled meeting. King Charles entered first, followed by Princess Anne and Prince Edward. The atmosphere in the room grew tense as they waited for Harry, who was running late as usual. When Harry finally arrived, 20 minutes past the appointed time, William could see the defiant look in his brother's eyes. Harry took his seat across from William, avoiding direct eye contact with anyone in the room. "Now that we're all here," the Queen began, "we need to address the recent media statements that have been made regarding the family's internal affairs." Harry shifted uncomfortably in his chair, knowing full well that this meeting was primarily about his actions. "If this is about my interview last week, I stand by everything I said. The family needs to be more transparent about mental health issues." William felt his temper rising. "Harry, you can't keep airing our private family matters in public. There are proper channels for addressing concerns within the family." "Proper channels?" Harry's voice rose slightly. "You mean the same channels that ignored my wife's struggles? The same system that failed to protect her when she needed support the most?" The room fell silent. Everyone knew Harry was referring to Meghan's well-documented struggles with media scrutiny and the lack of support she felt from the royal institution during her time as a working royal. King Charles cleared his throat, attempting to mediate. "Son, we all understand that period was difficult for everyone involved, but continuing to discuss these matters publicly only creates more division." Harry stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Division? The division already exists, Father. I'm simply being honest about it instead of pretending everything is perfect behind closed doors." William's patience finally snapped. He rose from his chair so forcefully that it nearly toppled backward. His hand came down on the polished wooden table with a loud bang that made everyone in the room jump. "Enough!" he shouted, his face flushed with anger. "I've had enough of your constant public attacks on this family, Harry. You want to talk about division? You're the one creating it with every interview, every statement, every time you choose to air our private business in front of the world." The Queen raised her hand, trying to restore order, but William was beyond calming down. Years of frustration, disappointment, and hurt were pouring out of him. "You left the family, Harry. You chose to step back from your duties, to move to another continent, to build a new life away from all of this. But you can't seem to let go. You keep dragging us back into your narrative, using our family's private struggles as content for your public platform." Harry's face had gone pale, but his jaw was set stubbornly. "I'm telling my truth, William. I have every right to share my experiences." "Your truth?" William's voice cracked with emotion. "What about the truth of how your actions affect the rest of us? What about the truth of how your public statements impact the Queen's legacy? What about the truth of how this constant drama affects our children, who have to see their uncle criticizing their family in the media?" The mention of the children seemed to hit Harry hard, and for a moment, his defiant expression wavered. But William wasn't finished. "You want to know what my truth is, Harry? My truth is that I've spent the last 3 years trying to protect this family's reputation while you've spent them tearing it down from across the ocean. My truth is that I've watched our grandmother, who has given her entire life to this country, have to deal with the fallout from your choices when she should be enjoying her final years in peace." The room was completely silent now, except for the sound of William's heavy breathing. Even Princess Anne, known for her no-nonsense attitude, looked shocked by the intensity of William's outburst. Harry finally found his voice. "So what are you saying, William? That I should just stay quiet about everything I've been through? That I should pretend the problems don't exist?" William's eyes were blazing as he looked at his younger brother. "I'm saying that there's a difference between addressing problems and exploiting them for personal gain. I'm saying that family loyalty should mean something even when times are difficult." "Family loyalty?" Harry laughed bitterly. "Where was the family loyalty when Meghan was being torn apart by the press? Where was the family loyalty when I was struggling with my mental health after losing our mother?" "We were here, Harry!" William shouted back. "We were always here. But you chose to handle everything publicly instead of working with us privately. You chose to turn our family into a soap opera for the world's entertainment." The tension in the room was suffocating. Queen Elizabeth looked older than her years as she watched her 2 grandsons, whom she loved dearly, tear each other apart with words. King Charles attempted to intervene again. "Boys, please. This isn't helping anyone. We need to find a way to move forward as a family." But William wasn't ready to calm down. The years of suppressed frustration had finally found their outlet, and he wasn't going to stop now. "Move forward?" he asked incredulously. "How can we move forward when every few weeks there's another interview, another documentary, another book deal that requires Harry to share more insights about the royal family? How can we move forward when our private conversations might end up in the next Netflix series?" Harry's face flushed with anger. "I never shared private conversations without good reason. Everything I've said has been to help people understand the reality of what it's like to be trapped in this system." "Trapped?" William's voice rose to a near shout. "You chose to be born into this family just as much as I did, which is to say not at all. But the difference between us is that I've chosen to honor the responsibility that comes with our birth, while you've chosen to profit from complaining about it." The words hung in the air like a physical blow. Harry's face went white, and for a moment, William almost regretted the harshness of his statement. Almost. "That's not fair, William," Harry said quietly, his voice shaking with emotion. "You don't know what it's like to be the spare. You don't know what it's like to live in someone else's shadow your entire life." William's anger flared again. "Don't know what it's like? Harry, do you think being the heir is some kind of prize? Do you think I chose this burden? The difference is that I've accepted it instead of spending years complaining about it to anyone who will listen." Queen Elizabeth finally spoke, her voice carrying an authority that immediately commanded attention. "That's quite enough from both of you. This family has weathered many storms over the decades, and we will weather this one as well, but not like this, not with this kind of public warfare between brothers." But William was beyond listening to reason. The floodgates had opened, and years of resentment were pouring out. "Grandmother, with all due respect, this isn't just about a family disagreement anymore. This is about the future of the monarchy itself. Every time Harry goes public with another criticism, another revelation, another attack on our institutions, it weakens everything our family has built over generations." He turned back to Harry, his voice cold and measured now. "You want your freedom? You have it. You want your new life in California? You have it. You want your media deals and your celebrity friends and your ability to speak your truth? You have all of it. But you can't have all of that and still expect to be welcomed back into the family circle as if nothing has changed." Harry's eyes filled with tears, but his voice remained steady. "So you're saying I have to choose? My family or my freedom to speak about my experiences?" William's next words would echo through the palace halls and change the relationship between the brothers forever. "I'm saying that actions have consequences, Harry. And after 3 years of watching you prioritize your public image over our family's well-being, after 3 years of watching you turn our private pain into public entertainment, after 3 years of trying to maintain some semblance of family unity while you consistently work to undermine it." William's voice grew louder with each word, building to a crescendo that would mark a turning point in royal family history. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the ticking of an antique clock on the mantelpiece. Everyone in the room understood that they had just witnessed something unprecedented in modern royal family dynamics. Queen Elizabeth's weathered hands gripped the arms of her chair as she processed what had just occurred. King Charles looked between his two sons with a mixture of sadness and resignation. The other family members sat frozen, unsure of how to react to such a public breakdown of brotherly bonds. Harry stood there, his face a mask of hurt and defiance, while William remained standing, his chest rising and falling with the effort of controlling his emotions. The morning sun that had seemed so peaceful earlier now felt harsh and unforgiving as it illuminated the fractured family dynamic. Outside the palace walls, life in London continued as normal. Tourists snapped photos, buses carried commuters to work, and the changing of the guard proceeded with its usual pomp and ceremony. But inside the Queen's private sitting room, the very foundation of the royal family's future had been shaken to its core. The meeting that was supposed to address family unity had instead revealed just how deep the divisions had become, and everyone present knew that there would be no easy path back to the way things used to be. The words that came next would reverberate through the centuries-old walls of Buckingham Palace and forever change the relationship between the two princes who had once been inseparable. William's voice cut through the silence like a blade, each word delivered with devastating precision. "I'm saying that if you cannot find it in yourself to support this family instead of constantly attacking it, then perhaps you should consider that your place is no longer beside me, or beside any of us, in any meaningful way." The room erupted in sharp intakes of breath. Princess Anne's usually composed demeanor cracked slightly, while Prince Edward shifted uncomfortably in his chair. King Charles's face went ashen as he realized the magnitude of what his eldest son had just declared. But William wasn't finished. The dam had burst completely now, and 3 years of careful diplomatic restraint came pouring out in a torrent of raw emotion. "You want to know what loyalty looks like, Harry? It looks like Catherine, who has been subjected to vicious attacks in the media but has never once responded publicly because she understands what discretion means. It looks like our father, who has endured decades of criticism but continues to serve this country with dignity. It looks like our grandmother, who has given her entire life to the crown and has never once complained publicly about the sacrifices required." Harry's hands were trembling now, but his voice remained defiant. "And what about loyalty to me, William? What about loyalty to your own brother when he was struggling?" William's laugh was bitter and cold. "Loyalty to you? I've been loyal to you for 38 years, Harry. I was loyal when you went through your wild phase and I helped cover for you. I was loyal when you struggled after Mother's death, and I made sure you got the help you needed. I was loyal when you wanted to marry Meghan, and I welcomed her into our family despite the concerns some of us had." The mention of Meghan caused Harry to stiffen, and William noticed immediately. "Oh, did I touch a nerve there?" "Yes. We had concerns, Harry. Not because of who she was, but because of how quickly everything was moving. But did we interfere? Did we try to stop you? No. We supported your decision because we wanted you to be happy." Queen Elizabeth attempted to intervene, her voice frail but authoritative. "William, perhaps we should take a moment to—" "No, grandmother," William interrupted, something that would have been unthinkable under normal circumstances. "I've been taking moments for 3 years. I've been diplomatic for 3 years. I've been understanding for 3 years. And where has it gotten us? Harry has used every olive branch we've extended as kindling for his next public bonfire." Harry stood up abruptly, his chair sliding backward with a harsh scraping sound. "You're twisting everything, William. You're making it sound like I left just to cause problems for the family. Didn't you?" William's voice was dangerously quiet now. "Tell me, Harry, what was the real reason for that Oprah interview? Was it to help people with mental health struggles, or was it to get revenge on a family you felt had wronged you? What was the real reason for the Netflix documentary? Was it to share your love story, or was it to settle scores with people who couldn't defend themselves publicly?" The accuracy of William's observations hit their mark, and Harry's defensive posture wavered for just a moment before hardening again. "I had a right to tell my story, William. I had a right to defend my wife when no one else would." "Your wife?" William's voice rose again. "Harry, we defended Meghan when it mattered. We issued statements. We took legal action against the worst offenders. We changed protocols to try to protect her. But it was never enough for either of you because what you really wanted was for us to fight a war we couldn't win against the entire British press." King Charles finally found his voice. "Boys, please. This kind of argument helps no one. We need to find a way to heal these wounds, not make them deeper." But William turned on his father with eyes blazing. "Heal these wounds? Father, every time we try to heal, Harry opens them again with another interview, another revelation, another attempt to rewrite history in a way that makes him the victim and us the villains." He spun back to face Harry, his voice growing louder with each sentence. "You want to talk about mental health? Let's talk about how your constant public attacks have affected our mental health. Let's talk about how Catherine has had to explain to our children why their uncle says negative things about their family on television. Let's talk about how our grandmother has had to endure the twilight of her reign being overshadowed by family drama instead of being celebrated for her incredible service." Harry's composure finally cracked, and tears started flowing down his cheeks. "You think this has been easy for me? You think I enjoyed leaving everything I knew? You think I wanted to be estranged from my family? I think," William said, his voice now deadly calm, "that you made a choice. And I think you've continued to make that same choice over and over again for 3 years. You chose your wife's comfort over your family's well-being. You chose financial independence over family loyalty. You chose Hollywood celebrity over royal duty. You chose public victimhood over private reconciliation." The words hit Harry like physical blows, and he staggered slightly before steadying himself against the back of his chair. "That's not fair, William. You're oversimplifying everything." "Am I?" William's voice was growing more powerful now, filled with 3 years of suppressed fury. "Then explain to me how we're supposed to move forward from here. Explain to me how we're supposed to trust you with family information when it might end up in your next book deal. Explain to me how we're supposed to include you in family decisions when you've made it clear that you'll go public with anything you disagree with." Queen Elizabeth's voice cut through the argument like a knife. "Enough! Both of you sit down this instant!" For a moment, both princes hesitated, caught between their respect for their grandmother and their overwhelming emotions. William slowly sank back into his chair, while Harry remained standing, his hands gripping the back of his chair so tightly his knuckles had gone white. "Your Majesty," William said, his voice still tight with anger but now more controlled. "I apologize for raising my voice in your presence, but I will not apologize for finally speaking the truth about what Harry's actions have done to this family." Harry found his voice again, though it shook with emotion. "And what truth is that, William? That I'm some kind of traitor for being honest about my experiences?" William rose from his chair again, but this time his movement was slower, more deliberate. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute finality. "The truth, Harry, is that you cannot serve two masters. You cannot be a member of the royal family and a critic of the royal family at the same time. You cannot expect the privileges of being a prince while rejecting the responsibilities that come with the title. You cannot demand family loyalty while offering none in return." The room had gone completely silent again, except for the sound of Harry's ragged breathing. Even the staff members who had been quietly moving about in the hallways seemed to have stopped, as if the entire palace was holding its breath. William continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "For 3 years we've tried to find a middle ground. For 3 years we've hoped that time and distance would help you remember what being part of this family means. For 3 years we've made excuses for your behavior and hoped that eventually you would choose to be our brother again instead of our critic." Harry's voice was barely a whisper when he responded. "I never stopped being your brother, William." "Didn't you?" William's question hung in the air like a challenge. "When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you asked about our children without it being part of some formal communication through lawyers or press secretaries? When was the last time you treated me like your brother instead of like your adversary?" Harry opened his mouth to respond, but found he had no answer. The truth of William's words was undeniable, and everyone in the room could see it written across Harry's face. "I thought so," William said quietly. Then his voice began to rise again, building toward the crescendo that would define their relationship for years to come. "You see, Harry, being brothers isn't just about sharing the same parents. It's about loyalty. It's about trust. It's about being there for each other even when times are difficult. It's about protecting each other from the world, not exposing each other to it." William's voice grew more powerful with each sentence, his anger and hurt finally finding their voice after 3 years of diplomatic silence. "But you chose a different path. You chose to make our private family struggles into public entertainment. You chose to turn our shared trauma into your personal brand. You chose to use your royal connection as a launching pad for a celebrity lifestyle while simultaneously attacking the very institution that gave you that platform." Harry was openly weeping now, but William showed no signs of relenting. The floodgates had opened, and years of suppressed emotion were pouring out. "And the worst part, Harry, the absolute worst part is that you've done all of this while claiming to be the victim. You've positioned yourself as the brave truth-teller standing up to the evil institution, when in reality, you're a privileged man who couldn't handle the pressure of public service and decided to burn down everything and everyone who reminded you of your failure." The brutality of William's words sent shockwaves through the room. Princess Anne's usual stoic expression cracked completely, while Prince Edward looked as if he wanted to disappear into his chair. King Charles had gone pale, and even Queen Elizabeth, who had seen and weathered countless family crises over her long reign, looked shaken by the venom in her grandson's voice. But William wasn't finished. The final blow was yet to come, and when it arrived, it would sever whatever remained of the bond between the two brothers. "So here's what I'm telling you, Harry. And I want everyone in this room to witness it because I never want to have this conversation again." William's voice dropped to a whisper, but somehow it carried more power than all his shouting had. In the deadly quiet of the room, every word was crystal clear and devastatingly final. William's hand came down on the polished mahogany table with such force that the antique vase in the center jumped and nearly toppled over. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of a future king and the finality of a brother who had reached his absolute limit. "Never beside me again." The 4 words exploded from William's lips with such raw power that everyone in the room felt their physical impact. Harry stumbled backward as if he had been physically struck, his face draining of all color. Queen Elizabeth's weathered hand flew to her chest, while King Charles looked as though he was witnessing the complete collapse of everything he had tried to hold together. "Never beside me again," William repeated, his voice growing even louder and more commanding. "Not at family events, not at state occasions, not at Christmas dinner, not at our children's birthday parties, not at weddings or funerals or christenings. Never beside me again." The repetition of the phrase had a devastating effect on everyone present, but especially on Harry, who began sobbing openly. The little boy who had once walked behind his mother's coffin beside his older brother, the young man who had served his country alongside William, the prince who had once been inseparable from his future king brother, that person seemed to crumble before their eyes. "William, please," Harry managed to choke out through his tears. "Don't do this. Don't end it like this." But William's resolve had hardened into something unbreakable. 3 years of diplomatic restraint, 3 years of trying to protect the family's public image, 3 years of hoping that love would eventually triumph over hurt. All of it had culminated in this moment of absolute finality. "End it?" William's voice was incredulous. "Harry, you ended it the moment you chose your media career over your family. You ended it when you decided that our private conversations were content for your next interview. You ended it when you made our mother's memory into a weapon to use against the very family she died trying to protect." The mention of their mother hit Harry like a physical blow, and he doubled over as if in pain. Even in her death, Princess Diana remained the most sensitive topic between the 2 brothers, and William's willingness to invoke her memory showed just how far beyond forgiveness this confrontation had gone. Queen Elizabeth finally found her voice, though it shook with emotion. "William, my dear boy, perhaps we should—" "No, grandmother," William interrupted again, his voice softening slightly when addressing her, but losing none of its determination. "This needs to be said. This needs to be heard. For 3 years, we've all tiptoed around the truth because we hoped that family love would somehow fix what Harry has broken. But love isn't enough when it's only flowing in one direction." He turned back to Harry, who was still bent over his chair, sobbing uncontrollably. "Stand up, Harry. Stand up and look at me when I'm talking to you." Something in William's tone compelled Harry to straighten, though tears continued to stream down his face. When their eyes met, William saw something that might have been the last flicker of the brother he had once known. "I want you to understand something very clearly," William said, his voice now steady and implacable. "This isn't anger talking. This isn't a temporary emotional outburst that I'll regret tomorrow. This is the result of 3 years of careful consideration, 3 years of watching you systematically destroy everything our family stands for, 3 years of hoping you would remember who you really are underneath all the celebrity nonsense and victim narratives." Harry tried to speak, but William held up a hand to silence him. "You had chances, Harry. So many chances. When you first left, we offered you a path back. When you did the Oprah interview, we offered to discuss your concerns privately. When you wrote your book, we offered to sit down as a family and work through our differences. Every single time, you chose the public spotlight over private reconciliation." William began pacing now, his energy too intense to remain still. The family members watched him move back and forth in front of the window like a caged lion finally released. "Do you know what I've realized over these 3 years? I've realized that you don't actually want reconciliation. You want vindication. You don't want to be part of this family. You want this family to admit that we wronged you so badly that all your subsequent actions are justified." Harry's voice was barely audible when he responded. "That's not true, William." "Isn't it?" William stopped pacing and faced his brother directly. "Then explain to me why every olive branch we've extended has been turned into another weapon. Explain to me why every private conversation we've had somehow finds its way into your next public appearance. Explain to me why you seem incapable of talking about your new life without attacking your old one." The questions hung in the air unanswered because they were unanswerable. Even Harry seemed to recognize the truth in William's accusations. "You want to know what the saddest part of all this is?" William continued, his voice taking on a tone of profound sadness beneath the anger. "The saddest part is that I used to look up to you. When we were children, after Mother died, you were the one who could make me laugh. You were the one who reminded me that being royal didn't mean we couldn't be human. You were my little brother, but in many ways, you were also my teacher." Harry's sobs intensified as William spoke about their childhood, and for a moment, it seemed as though the future king might relent. But the moment passed quickly. "But somewhere along the way, you stopped being my teacher and my brother and became my critic and my enemy. Somewhere along the way, you decided that tearing down everything we were raised to believe in was more important than preserving the bond between us." William's voice began to rise again, building toward his final devastating declaration. "So yes, Harry, I'm ending it. But I'm not ending something that exists. I'm simply acknowledging that it ended a long time ago when you made your choices. I'm simply stating out loud what your actions have already made clear." The room was completely silent, except for Harry's quiet crying and the distant sound of London traffic outside. Everyone present understood that they were witnessing the formal end of one of the most famous brotherly relationships in modern royal history. William moved closer to Harry, close enough that his next words would be heard only by his brother and the family members present. "From this moment forward, Harry, you are no longer my brother in any meaningful sense. You are a former member of the royal family who shares my bloodline, nothing more. When you appear at public events where your presence is protocol required, you will not stand beside me. You will not sit beside me. You will not be acknowledged by me beyond what basic courtesy demands." Harry looked up at William with eyes red from crying, and for a moment, the mask of defiance slipped completely away, revealing the hurt and confused young man underneath. "William, please. I know I've made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can work through it. We're brothers. We're all we have left of her." The mention of their mother one more time seemed to give William pause, but only for a moment. "You're right, Harry. We were all we had left of her, past tense, because the brother who shared that loss with me, who understood what it meant to lose her, that person is gone. You killed him when you decided that our private grief was public content." William's voice grew stronger and more final with each word. "The person standing in front of me now is someone who shares my DNA and my history, but not my values or my loyalty. The person standing in front of me now is someone who has chosen fame over family, celebrity over service, and personal grievance over collective responsibility." Harry made one last, desperate attempt to reach the brother he had once been so close to. "What about our children, William? What about George and Charlotte and Louis? What about Archie and Lilibet? Are you going to let this destroy their relationships too?" For the first time since the confrontation began, William's expression softened slightly at the mention of the children, but when he spoke, his resolve remained unshaken. "Our children will know their cousins, Harry. That's not negotiable. But they will also understand why their uncle is not part of their daily lives. They will understand that actions have consequences and that family loyalty is not something to be taken for granted." William took a deep breath, preparing to deliver his final words on the matter. As for you never standing beside me again, that's not just an emotional declaration, Harry. That's a formal statement of how things will be from this point forward. When I become king, you will not be part of my inner circle. You will not be consulted on matters of state. You will not be invited to private family gatherings. You will not be welcomed at Balmoral or Sandringham for holidays. The finality in William's voice was absolute, and everyone in the room understood that this was not a negotiating position. It was a declaration of permanent separation. You wanted your freedom, Harry. You wanted your independence. You wanted your new life away from all of this. Well, you have it, completely and permanently. But you cannot have your freedom and your family too. Not anymore. Not after everything you've done to tear down what the rest of us have spent our lives trying to build up. William moved back toward his chair, but remained standing, his posture straight and regal despite the emotional intensity of the moment. "This meeting is over," he announced to the room. "Harry, you can see yourself out. Everyone else, we have other matters of state to discuss." The dismissal was complete and devastating. Harry stood there for several long moments, as if hoping someone would intervene, someone would tell William he had gone too far. Someone would remind him that family was supposed to forgive. But no one spoke. King Charles sat with his head in his hands, looking older than his years. Queen Elizabeth stared out the window with an expression of profound sadness. Princess Anne and Prince Edward avoided eye contact with anyone. Finally, Harry walked slowly toward the door, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Just before he reached it, he turned back one final time. "I love you, William. Despite everything, I love you." William didn't turn around when he responded, his voice carrying across the room with cold finality. "Love without loyalty is just sentiment, Harry. And sentiment isn't enough to rebuild what you've destroyed." The door closed behind Harry with a soft click that seemed to echo through the centuries-old palace like the sound of a coffin being sealed. Outside, the changing of the guard continued with its usual precision. Tourists snapped photos of the palace gates, and life in London carried on as normal. But inside the Queen's private sitting room, the royal family sat in stunned silence, processing what they had just witnessed. The brotherhood that had once been held up as an example of family unity in the face of tragedy had officially ended, not with a quiet fading away, but with the explosive confrontation that would redefine the monarchy for generations to come. William remained standing at the window long after the meeting had officially ended, watching his brother's car disappear through the palace gates, and knowing that, despite the pain it caused him, he had finally done what needed to be done to protect the institution he would one day lead. The age of the royal brothers was officially over.